Hi everyone, it's Jerry. Let's have a look at a game from the 1971 Candidates Final, a round 7 game between Bobby Fischer on the white end and Tigran Petrosian. So it would be the winner of this match that would go on to challenge Boris Spassky for the world title. I was playing a slower game recently, and I was reminded of this move 22 by Fischer in this game. This surprising move 22. It was Fischer's idea in this game that helped, let's say, give me the confidence to execute an idea in my own game. It can sometimes be difficult to, let's say, break certain rules. So let's dive in and see how this one plays out. Opening wise, we have an open Sicilian, Khan variation. Aside from this move 22 talk, there are other instructional moments in this game. If you're looking for a good game that demonstrates how to take advantage of weak pawns, isolated pawns, in a fairly simplified position, this one gets my vote. Now, from here, we have the line move 5, bishop d3 against the Khan. This knight, now unprotected, is challenged. White takes. Black, taking towards the center, looks to establish a strong point. d5. So this point is challenged. Defense, series of exchanges, and an important moment is this move 10, how to recapture on d5. The suggestions by the engine says take with the queen or the knight, or in other words, play within the structure. You can see how a human would quickly, let's say, dismiss queen takes d5 because of the development with tempo. Let's just have a peek at knight takes d5. What would maybe keep black from playing knight takes d5? Well, there can be some ensuing pressure against this knight, who's now in a pin, and it may be the case that white can force onto black an isolated pawn, and even have some more piece exchanges in the process. So the idea here with move 10, let's just take on the isolated pawn. Let's just play with some more minor pieces on the board, the queen's on the board, at least for this moment. Okay, from here, we have some more development. And another thing, now that black has this isolated pawn, what would be a desirable exchange for white? Does anything come to mind for you? Feel free to pause the video and find an answer to that question. Okay, anyhow, I'm just going to share some thoughts of mine. I think a dark square bishop exchange would be desirable for white. And the reason for this, this pawn would like to be able to move one day. And the number one minor piece that's going to help out with that is the dark square bishop. It's a very good supporter of a d4 advance, and in an ideal world, what white would like to have happen is a dark square bishop exchange, and then this knight right here, blockading that isolated pawn, that passed pawn. And you'll find that this knight on d4 without dark square bishops on board will be much easier to maintain. Won't need a babysitter over the d4 knight. This guy won't be around to put pressure on it. Okay. Anyhow, we have something to look forward to, is what I'm getting at. A dark square bishop exchange. Look, we're playing as white. Now, queen a4 check is met with queen d7. Maybe tempting to play bishop d7. It's a top suggestion by the engine. A reason to maybe not do this. White ducks, puts the queen on d4 and says, aha, now your major piece has to defend a6, and I only have a minor piece putting pressure on it. That may cause an imbalance elsewhere. The bishop, I feel, will be the most efficient defender of a6. I think the bishop would stand well patrolling that main diagonal. Okay. With black's move 12, queen d7, this is not only there to offer a queen exchange, but also offering the exchange. What am I talking about? Move 13, what does Fischer play next? And also, how can white win some material? Okay, here we go. In the game, it's rook to e1. How can Fischer win some material? Well, bishop to b5. A skewer, you would have to take the bishop in order to save the queen, and there you go. White can win a rook for a bishop. Now, why does Fischer not go for this? Well, I guess a matter of taste. Preferring a much more controlled position, much more simplistic position, static position. This one is dynamic. This one would be dynamic if white is going for this material. Why? Well, the knight is unstable. It can be kicked with d4, b4. I'm thinking d4 at some point would hit. Opening up one day the bishop's eyes to g2. Where does the knight go? It gets messy. Now you stare at a computer evaluation. It's going to love this position for white. Not so easy, however, two humans going at it. In short, Fischer's going for something static. Rook to e1, something much more controlled. Queens are exchanged. Bishop e6. Guess where this guy's headed? e3. Now just one move away from a dark square bishop exchange. In this position, black castles. Suggestion by the engine is to fight off this bishop to c5 move. Fight off the knight that's on a4. In this game, it's castles. Bishop c5, dark square bishop exchange. What to do from here? Move 18 is very instructive. Move 18 sets the stage for an eventual Zugzwang. Black is going to have some... Black's going to have to enter or Black's going to be in a very awkward position, let's just say, because of this next decision by Fischer. What is this decision? Feel free to pause the video. Okay, here we go. You ready? b4. Now, what's the story with b4? How tempting it might be, right? To, let's say, move a knight forward in black's house, and you're throwing a punch. But black can simply play a5 and say, what are you staring at now? Nothing. The idea with b4 is to fix a weak pawn on a6. Now, not in the most direct sense to fix the pawn on a6, but at least say this much. If you move, there's a cost, and that cost is you have given me a passed pawn. White will reply with b5. So it is first b4, and only then knight c5. This will now cause black to bend over backwards. Underdeveloping with bishop to c8 has to now babysit this weak pawn on a6. Again, this all started because of this one key move, b4. Let's see how this kind of snowballs into something much more serious for black. f3. Nice multi-purpose move. Control the knight. And how great it would be to have the king on d4. There's now a path onto that strong central square. Rook a7. For the moment, putting both major pieces on a6 so that this bishop can reroute somewhere else. Rook e5, bishop d7, and here we are, move 22. A surprising moment in this game. This next decision by Fischer is one that had several Grandmasters talking in the press room, and Miguel Najdorf even claiming that it was a mistake. Well, it wasn't a mistake. It was a move that would, well, allow the white rooks to become very active. This next decision allows the white rooks to enter black's position very easily. Now, what is this move? Well, feel free to pause the video. What does Fischer do next? Okay, here we go. Knight takes bishop. Now, why is this so surprising? Well, generally speaking, the bishop is better than the knight, but not in this position. The knight is superior to the bishop. It's unchallenged by any black pawns. These pawns interfere with the bishop's mobility. Taking the bishop in this position is allowing these weak pawns to be more accessible to the white rooks. So wait till you see how black now gets tied down. Rook c1, rook c7. The threat here was to get to rook c6. So black is defending that. This rook is defending both weak pawns, but giving up the 7th rank. It's now occupied, and the threat is to get the other rook here. That would be too much to deal with. So black goes backwards just to interfere with rook e7. Also throws a punch. Rook e2. And now notice this position. Move 18 was b4, right? And we have a series of, we had some backward moves, some defensive moves. a6 has the attention of the black pieces. What does black do here? If the knight moves, the rook gets to the 7th. If the rook moves, the knight falls. What about this rook? If it goes to this square, it's not even threatening b4. White can take a6 and say, you take my bishop, I take your knight. You take my pawn, I'm going to give checkmate. What else is there? Well, let's say a rook exchange. That's really not going to help. Black will still have to go on the defensive, and there's forward progress for white to make, working with the 2-1 majority. This guy's passed, but going nowhere. What does black have to do? There's only kingside pawn moves for black. That's what we have at these next handful of moves. g6, king f2, h5, f4, fixing this pawn on a light square, maybe looking to one day expand. White can inch his way up with g3, h3, g4, maybe one day getting a pawn here, taking away a square from a knight. There's ways to improve for white. h4 is now met with king f4, looking to simply pick up the pawn. This causes another concession in black's camp, some more weaknesses. f5 keeps the king out of g4, but this square is now maybe something, a square that white can occupy at some stage if this rook goes elsewhere. From here, king e3. I like this little maneuver by the king. It's luring the black pawns forward. Weaknesses are now created. White just now a moment away from getting to this strong post on d4. That shot down. At the same time, notice the weakness that is created on c4. A new possibility is now present for the bishop. Now from here we have knight to b6, which is allowing the white rook to get to e7, and it's really going to be painful for black. Some other try besides knight to b6, I'm not sure what to suggest. Let's have a look at rook to b8. If rook to b8 is played, white can play bishop to c4, immediately making use of that weakness after the d4 move. This pawn is poisoned. This would lead to a mate in 3. One way or the other, that's mate. And if you go here, that's mate. Let's say rook b8, bishop c4, and something else. I'm not sure what that something else is even. The rook can't go too far. If we have this, we can exchange rooks, rook to a7, and again, we've basically seen a position like this before where, 2-1 majority on the queen side. White is even closer in this scenario with gobbling up this pawn if this rook goes elsewhere. Black is totally on their back foot in this position. What is tried is knight b6. Rook e to e7. There's a fork, but there's a way out. With the check, rook to b7. This knight is a long way off from threatening either rook. And yeah, we have mate threats nearby. Bishop c4, move 34. Is the final move of this game. Black resigns. What do you do here? There's multiple winning ideas for white. The simple idea after bishop to c4 is to offset the knight, not even allow it to get to any of these two squares to, let's say, try and defend on f8. And white is just a moment away from playing rook h7 to rook h8. Not a good solution to that. So for example, let's just say rook here. You can just come over like this. Something else. You can also give check like this, king d8, and then rook h7. There's just no good solution to the rook getting to the 8th rank. Knight here right away, you can give check and simply win a piece. So again, no way to prevent the loss of material. Black resigns at this stage. So an instructive game, to be sure, aside from this surprising move 22, exchanging a strong knight for a bad bishop that was completely on the defensive. These points with b4, playing against the isolated pawn, welcoming the dark square bishop exchange. This eventually led to a position where black, regardless of what move was played, would have to concede something. Anyhow, as usual, feel free to leave any feedback to this video in the comments section below. Hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care.